What if the life you know wasn't exactly as you think it is? Imagine for a moment that everything you call real, your identity, your family, your profession, your dreams, and even your memories, were just a constructed scenario, a performance so convincing that it holds your attention to every detail. What the eyes see, the ears hear, and the mind interprets may not be the truth itself, but a projection shaped by consciousness. Hindu philosophy has given a name to this veil that covers the essence, Maya, the great cosmic illusion. When we hear the word illusion, many think of magic tricks or something fantastical, but here the idea is deeper. Maya is not just deception or lies. It is an active energy that shapes the universe and at the same time hides what lies beyond. It is like watching a show. The curtains open, the actors enter the stage, the emotions are real, but when the play ends, everything falls apart. The problem is that we live as if the theater were definitive, without realizing that we can wake up during the performance. Have you ever had a dream so real that when you woke up, it took a few moments to realize it was just a dream? The feeling was that time had stretched out, that the people you met and the places you visited really existed. Now imagine that your entire life can be compared to this process, a prolonged dream that is confused with reality. This provocation, which may seem frightening, is present in many teachings of the Vedas and Upanishads. They say that the mind, the senses, and the material world are part of a divine game that deceives us only until the inner light awakens. A classic example used by the sages is that of the rope in the dark. Walking through a dimly lit room, someone sees what they believe to be a snake on the floor. The body reacts, fear arises, the heart races. Everything seems so real that there is no room for questioning. But just turn on a light, and you realize that there never was a snake, only a rope. In the same way, Maya creates misleading perceptions and makes us react to them as if they were ultimate reality. Only when consciousness expands is the deception undone. That is why it is said that everything that changes cannot be the essence. The body ages, thoughts change, emotions vary, but there is something that remains constant, the silent presence that observes all of this. Maya acts precisely to confuse this presence with what is temporary. It makes you believe that you're just a name, a form, a profession, a desire, or a status. But none of this is permanent, and the true self cannot be limited to what is impermanent. Observe your daily life. You wake up, check your messages, think about work, money, relationships, everything you need to achieve. With every piece of good news, you feel excited. With every obstacle, you fall into sadness or anger. The day turns into a succession of ups and downs. Deep down, this process is fueled by desires that never run out. There always seems to be something missing. When one goal is achieved, another arises. When one desire is satisfied, another soon takes its place. This endless race is one of Maya's most effective ways of keeping consciousness imprisoned. Ancient texts say that desire never ages. Only human beings age while chasing after it. Ask yourself, where do these desires come from? Are they really yours? Or were they planted in your mind by society, by comparison with others, by the media that constantly creates images of happiness? We often believe we are free, but we are obeying an invisible script. Maya not only creates the illusion, but also whispers, "This is what you need to be happy." And so we go on, like Narada Muni in his famous story. Narada, a devoted disciple, believed he was above the power of illusion. He told Krishna that nothing could divert him from his devotion. Krishna, serene, just smiled and asked Narada to bring him some water one day. On the way, Narada came across a village, met a young woman, and completely forgot his mission. He got married, had children, and built a whole life. Years passed in his experience until a tragedy destroyed everything he had built. Through his tears, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Krishna asking calmly, "Where's the water I asked for?" For Narada, decades had passed. For Krishna, only a few minutes. This story shows how Maya is capable of transforming moments into entire lives. Time, bonds, feelings, everything seems definitive until you realize that they were just projections. In the same way, we also live stories that seem solid, but are only chapters of a bigger dream. The suffering that seems unbearable today will one day be a memory. The joy that seems eternal today will also pass. Nothing lasts forever, and it is in this impermanence that the presence of the eternal is revealed. Modern science curiously dialogues with this teaching. Quantum physics has shown that reality does not exist in a definite form until it is observed. The so-called observer effect indicates that consciousness actively participates in the creation of what we perceive as real. David Bohm, a contemporary physicist, developed the idea of implicit order, an invisible and profound field where all possibilities exist in a latent state. The visible world would be only a small manifest fraction of this hidden order. This view is close to the Upanishad's assertion that Brahman is the totality and that Maya is the process by which the unlimited presents itself in limited forms. Neuroscience also recognizes the mystery. The brain only receives electrical and chemical stimuli, but who feels, who perceives? This question remains unanswered, perhaps because the answer does not lie in matter, but in the consciousness that transcends it. Carl Jung took another step by saying that the individual mind is only the surface of a vast collective unconscious. In this invisible ocean, archetypes, symbols, and universal memories are present, influencing our perception. Thus, what we call I is only part of a much larger network. Whether through philosophy, science, or personal experience, the conclusion is the same. What we take to be reality is only a reflection. There is something beyond what the eyes can see and the mind can conceive. The challenge is to awaken to this without running away from life. It is not necessary to abandon the world or live in isolation to perceive what is real. Awakening can happen in the midst of routine, in the moment you observe your own thoughts, in the moment you practice gratitude, in the decision to live more consciously. Maya does not need to be feared. On the contrary, it needs to be understood. It is a teacher that shows, by contrast, what is eternal. When you understand that every experience is temporary, freedom arises. You can participate in the game of life. You can laugh, cry, love, work, but without losing yourself. You can live knowing that everything is a stage, and that behind it there is something that never changes. That something is the silent consciousness that has always been present. If you have come this far, it is because something inside you resonates with this call. It is not just curiosity, it is a thirst for truth. This is the beginning of awakening. To reinforce this commitment, leave a comment saying where you are watching from. Share your experience, like this video, and spread the message. Every gesture strengthens a network of seekers who, like you, want to see beyond the veil. The most important thing to remember is that life may continue as before, but your perception does not have to remain the same. Once you recognize the illusion, it no longer has the power to deceive you. You're not the character in the story. You are the observer, and that observer is eternal. The story of Narada Muni remains one of the most powerful metaphors for the power of Maya, because it clearly shows how the human mind can be captured by illusion so convincingly that even years of spiritual practice can be forgotten in an instant. When Narada met the young woman in the village, his attention shifted completely. He believed he had found a new destiny, built a family, felt joys, pains, responsibilities. And when he lost everything in a tragedy, he cried as if that were the only reality. But it only took Krishna touching his shoulder for him to realize that all that time had been nothing more than minutes. This story makes us reflect on how often we believe that our problems, our dramas, and even our achievements are absolute and unchangeable, when in fact they are nothing more than transitory experiences that can dissolve in an instant. This is the power of Maya, to transform the fleeting into the absolute, the ephemeral into the eternal, the illusory into the definitive. It is as if we live continuously in a prolonged dream, convinced that every detail is solid and indestructible. However, just like in a nighttime dream, there comes a moment when consciousness awakens and understands that none of it had any substance of its own. The real awakening is realizing that everyday life can be very similar to this process. Modern science helps illustrate this idea in a surprising way. Quantum physics experiments show that particles have no definite position or shape until they are observed. This means that reality is not a fixed scenario, but a field of possibilities that only becomes concrete when consciousness comes into play. The so-called observer effect reinforces the notion that the mind participates in the creation of what we perceive. This resonates with the view of the Upanishads, which say that the world is a manifestation of consciousness and that Maya is the power that gives form to this manifestation. David Bohm, a 20th century physicist, spoke of an implicit order, a hidden field in which all possibilities are present. What we see, touch, and feel would be only the explicit order, the visible fraction of an invisible ocean. This description is close to what the Vedic masters have always taught. The universe is sustained by a reality that cannot be perceived directly by the senses. Maya is not a lie, but the process by which this deep reality presents itself in a limited way so that human consciousness can experience it. If we look closely at our own lives, we will see that Maya is at work every moment. Think about how an emotion can completely dominate the mind. Anger makes everything seem wrong. Joy makes everything seem perfect. Anxiety creates terrible futures that seem real, even though they have not happened. The mind projects images, the body reacts, and everything seems absolutely true. But after a while, we realize that it was just a state, that it was not eternal. This constant oscillation is the fertile ground where Maya acts, convincing us that we are the emotions, when in fact we are the consciousness that observes them. Neuroscience shows us that the brain only receives stimuli and translates them into perceptions. But who is the subject that feels? Who observes what the brain produces? This question remains open, and perhaps it can never be answered by science alone, because the answer is not in matter, but in that which transcends matter. Carl Jung added that the individual mind is only part of a collective unconscious, a vast ocean of symbols and archetypes that influence our perceptions and choices. Thus, much of what we think are personal decisions may be rooted in much broader patterns. Maya acts precisely at this point. It makes us believe that we are isolated individuals, when in fact we are deeply connected to something greater. But given this picture, the inevitable question arises: is it possible to awaken from Maya while we live here? The answer given by the masters is clear: yes. Awakening does not mean escaping the world, but seeing the world in a different way. It is not necessary to abandon life, but to transform it into conscious practice. The simple act of breathing can become meditation. The way we act can become service. The way we look at someone can become devotion. When each moment is lived with presence, the illusion loses its power, The spiritual tradition offers different paths to cross Maya. Gyana Yoga is the path of knowledge, in which the essential question is asked repeatedly. Who am I? By observing that everything changes, the body, thoughts, emotions, the seeker discovers that there is something that never changes. That something is the silent observer, the eternal consciousness. Recognizing this dissolves the illusion of identification with the transient. Bhakti Yoga is the path of devotion. When the heart surrenders to the divine, the ego loses space. Pride dissolves and separation disappears. In this state, Maya does not need to be fought because it loses power in the face of love. Devotion transforms every gesture into an offering, and life becomes a celebration. Karma Yoga is the path of conscious action. It is not about abandoning responsibilities, but about fulfilling them without attachment to the result. The sacred texts say that we have a right to action, but not to its fruits. When each task is done as a service, the mind is purified and the heart is freed. The world continues, but it is no longer a prison. The illusion that we need to control everything disappears, and the freedom to simply act emerges. These paths are not mutually exclusive. They can walk together. At different times, each one can manifest itself. Sometimes knowledge is necessary to question. At other times, love is what sustains us. On other occasions, conscious action is what strengthens us. The important thing is to remember that Maya can be faced in many ways, but they all lead to the same point: the discovery that we are more than we think we are. The practice of gratitude is another simple way to weaken Maya. When you're grateful for what you have, even if it is little, the mind stops fixating on what is lacking and opens up to the abundance that already exists. Gratitude dissolves the illusion of lack, showing that life is already full in every detail. This state reveals that Maya only has power when we believe in a narrative of scarcity and lack. Simplicity is perhaps the most overlooked key. Many believe that complex rituals, distant retreats, or extreme renunciations are necessary to achieve liberation. But the truth is that consciousness can awaken in the midst of ordinary life. Eating mindfully, listening to someone with presence, breathing consciously, all of these are practices for dissolving illusion. Liberation is not about running away, but about living each moment knowing that everything is temporary. Those who understand this no longer fear Maya. She ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. Every difficulty becomes a lesson. Every loss an opportunity for detachment. Every joy a gift to be savored. Life continues with its ups and downs, but the observer remains serene. If this message has resonated with you so far, don't forget to strengthen this movement. Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And write the word magic in the comments. This simple gesture is a silent reminder that you are part of a network of seekers who have also decided to awaken. Each word written is like a burning flame, and the more people light this flame, the more light spreads. Awakening is not something distant, reserved for a select few. It is available right now, in this moment, in the simple act of recognizing that you are not the character, but the consciousness observing the scene. This recognition is already liberation. The world can continue. Maya can continue, but you are no longer confused. You know that you are eternal. The essence of all spiritual paths points to the same destination: to stabilize the heart, purify the mind, and awaken consciousness. When the seeker finds serenity within, Maya no longer exerts the same control. The body may continue to live in the flow of change. Thoughts may still arise like clouds, but the observer remains untouched. This is the meaning of Yogachit Vritti Naroda, the appeasement of the oscillations of the mind. Meditation, breath control, mantra repetition. Each traditional practice serves as a tool to silence the excess of inner noise. Gradually, consciousness turns inward, away from distractions, and learns to simply witness. In this state, Maya can manifest itself, but can no longer deceive. It is not necessary to abandon the world or flee to isolated caves. True awakening happens here, in everyday life. It is in the way you deal with your relationships, how you react to difficulties, how you enjoy the simple moments of life. Liberation does not require renouncing everything, but living with presence and clarity. With every conscious moment, with every gesture made with gratitude, Maya loses strength. The key is to live simply and recognize the impermanence of everything. When you understand that nothing is fixed, even pain becomes a lesson. Many believe that illusion must be fought as an enemy. But the biggest secret is that it is also a guide. Maya shows us what is not, so that the seeker may discover what is. Every time we believe its narratives and suffer, we have the opportunity to learn that it was not eternal. It is like a baby who plays with dolls until he realizes that they are not real life. So too does consciousness mature, experiencing illusion until it recognizes the truth that was behind it all. The scriptures summarize this process in a simple and powerful phrase, Tatvamasi, you are that. You are the same essence that sustains the universe. Illusion exists, but it is only the surface. The truth is that the spark you carry is the same spark that gave rise to the cosmos. When this understanding becomes direct experience, life ceases to be a prison and becomes a path of discovery. At every moment, no matter how simple, you find an opportunity to remember who you really are. It is common for seekers to think that they need great mystical experiences to be free. But awakening does not depend on grandiose visions. It happens in the daily practice of awareness. When you breathe and notice your breath, when you listen to someone with full attention, when you give thanks for a small detail, you are practicing liberation. There is no need to wait for a special moment. The present is always the opportunity. Gratitude is one of the most powerful tools. When you give thanks, your perspective changes immediately. The mind that lived in lack begins to recognize abundance. Gratitude dissolves incessant desire and shows that there is already fulfillment in every detail of life. Maya, which feeds on feelings of lack, loses strength in the face of sincere gratitude. In this state, even difficulties become gifts as they reveal hidden lessons. Simplicity is also a forgotten key. In a world that values excess and complexity, being simple is an act of spiritual rebellion. Living with awareness in every action, cultivating presence in every experience, transforming the ordinary into the sacred. This is awakening. There is no need to seek miracles outside. The miracle is realizing that every moment is a manifestation of consciousness. If you have come this far, it is not by chance. It shows that there is a restlessness within you, a desire to look beyond the surface. This is the call of the soul, the reminder that there is something greater that cannot be stifled by routine. Recognizing Maya is the first step. The second is to decide not to forget this recognition. Life will bring distractions, but each reminder strengthens the flame of consciousness. The risk is hearing all this and continuing as before, like someone who watches an interesting story but then forgets it. That is why it is important to create small symbols that keep the memory alive. Writing the word magic in the comments, for example, is a simple gesture, but one that becomes a sign of commitment. It is as if each person who writes it is saying to themselves, I recognize the illusion and choose to remember it. By joining so many others who do the same, you realize that you are not walking alone. There is a silent community united by the same purpose. This space does not exist for empty entertainment. Here we do not talk about superficial motivation that disappears in hours. Every word, every reflection, every story is offered as a mirror, not to show only the external appearance, but to reflect what you already are and may have forgotten. Maya works to make you believe that you're only body, mind, and circumstances. But what echoes here is the reminder that you are eternal consciousness. If this message touched your heart, if it somehow awakened something deep within you, don't keep it to yourself. Strengthen this movement. Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. These gestures are not just support, they're ways to spread this light so that more people can also remember who they are. Every comment, every interaction is like a lit candle, and when many candles come together, darkness loses its power. Life will continue to bring joys and challenges, but the way you experience them will not be the same. Before, the illusion dragged on without choice. Now there is clarity. The character continues to act on stage, but you are no longer confused with him. You are the observer who knows that everything is part of a temporary show. This clarity is what we call liberation. It is not about disappearing or abandoning responsibilities, but about living each moment with lucidity. The final invitation is to wake up now, in this moment. Don't wait for Maya to disappear, because she will always be part of the game of life. But learn to recognize her. Live with gratitude, presence, and love. Transform every simple gesture into a reminder of who you are. When you do this, you will realize that illusion never had real power over you. Maya's only power was forgetfulness. When memory awakens, everything changes. As you end this journey, remember, life is a dream, but you can wake up within it. That is true freedom. You are not what changes, you are what remains. You are not the story, you are the observer. And that observer is eternal.